I'm starting to press record now. I'm acknowledging that we have Devin and Dante who will be doing their presentations. Both are graduating in December. So we will make sure we're following through on their schedules, because they, in fact, have to have their grades submitted prior to the normal time for non-graduating students. I've asked Dante to share first. I'm acknowledging that at 6:30 we should have a guest joining us. And at some point, Devin will share his piece with his additional guest coming in to join us to share the conclusion as relates to our Sociology of Baltimore project. So without further ado, I'm going to have Dante share. And then when that guest does join us, I'll introduce that person, have them share some thoughts, and then bring in Devin in that way, because I think it'll be just neat, because Devin invited our guest. And so we're going to be able to engage or at some point as he's going to be presenting. So Dante, you have the floor.
Thank you. Just give me 1 second.
And when our guest joins us, please all, if you are able, please come on camera, because I'm okay with talking to names and still photos, but everyone else isn't. And it also just makes us feel like we're engaging. So thank you.
Can everybody see my screen okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm gonna begin with a brief video. So I'm gonna try to keep my presentation short and sweet. I'm about to play the video, so just please let me know that you can hear it with a simple thumbs up or down.
It is impossible to imagine America without Black people, and thus it's impossible to imagine America without a Black narrative. My name is Ta-Nehisi Coates. I'm the author of Between the World and Me. It's a very intimate work that's written, addressed to my son. Really, this is a work that is, at least from my perspective, I was certainly attempting to root it in history. America is rather singular. The country that claimed to be premised on freedom actually was only able to fulfill that promise for a portion of its population, and did it by brutalizing and enslaving another portion. And so all of American art is haunted in a particular way. My inspirations would be a very long list. But if we just kept it at Howard, I was there when I could read Amiri Baraka for the first time in my life. Very early in my writerly career, 19, 20 years old, I'm hearing somebody who's writing how Black people talk. It's one thing to actually read somebody's work, but then to read them at the university where they actually attended. And to have, for instance, Ossie Davis on campus right there, addressing the students, talking about his time at Howard. It was a beautiful thing. It was a tremendous thing. And what I was trying to do in the book was just give some idea of what that meant and what it was. Son, I remember walking down to the tailgate party. I saw the entire diaspora around me. Hustlers, lawyers, cappers, busters, doctors, barbers, deltas, drunkards, geeks and nerds. And I felt myself disappearing into all of their bodies. I always felt that I was part of a continuum of struggle. And in my sense, that world was in literature and among writers. I don't think I would be here talking right now without the support of Toni Morrison, who went to Howard and very much endorsed Between the World and Me as a book. And so I think it's very important to be supportive of younger writers. The most important thing is to not stop, because at the beginning of your career, you have barely become what you ultimately will become. As somebody that published Between the World and Me when I was almost 40 years old, at that point, I'd been basically writing professionally for almost 20 years. You really have to get into the practice and the craft of it, and it's really important that you keep going. Those that win in the long term are the ones that just refuse to stop.
Dear son.
Son to my daughter.
Dear brothers.
I would not have you descend into your dream.
I would have you be a conscious citizen
of this terrible and beautiful world.
So as a quick reminder, my presentation is about Ta-Nehisi Coates, born in Baltimore, Maryland, 1975, or excuse me, born in Baltimore, Maryland, 1975 to his father, William Paul Coates. William Paul Coates was a former Black Panther, is also founder of the Black Classic Press, one of the very few sort of publishing companies in the United States owned, Black owned. Coates is one of 7 siblings and half siblings. He grew up in West Baltimore, attended public schools in Baltimore area, and before matriculated into Howard University for journalism. Coates left Howard University without graduating. But as the video sort of spoke to a lot of his influences came from Howard University books, Amir Baraka, for example, James Baldwin, etc. So these are pictures of Ta-Nehisi Coates's brothers and sisters when he was younger, and then a picture, at least to my right, of baby Ta-Nehisi and his father. And so education was a huge, significant influence for Ta-Nehisi, especially coming from his mom. Ta-Nehisi family gives him as much education at home as he received at school, if not even more, but it also was in a different kind. His parents repeatedly stressed the importance of acquiring social, cultural, and ethnic education on your own because the school system in a lot of ways is insufficient. This is a particular quote from his book, Between the World and Me, which it says, "Your grandmother taught me to read when I was only 4. She also taught me to write, by which I mean not simply organized in a set of sentences into a series of paragraphs, but organizing them as a means of investigation." In that very same book, Ta-Nehisi Coates recalled how his grandmother and his mother would pretty much force him to write as a form of punishment in order to flesh out exactly why he did certain behaviors. His father's influence was also pretty heavy on Ta-Nehisi. It's another particular quote that I grabbed from the book. He said, "Your grandfather loved books. It loved them to this day, and they were all over the house. Books about Black people, by Black people, for Black people, spilling off the shelves and out of the living room, boxed up in the basement. I read through all of Dad's books about the Panthers and his stash of old party newspapers." As I mentioned earlier, his father owns Black Classic Press. He was also a librarian at Howard University. Possibly one of the reasons why Ta-Nehisi had a significant affinity for the university. Described it like a lot of people described it as the Mecca. But it's his father still to this day is pretty active in terms of publishing and still, engaged heavily in the world of books. These are some of the books that I pulled, just sort of knowing Ta-Nehisi's work, looking at his books and his interviews. There's some of the notable books that he's mentioned over time. James Baldwin in particular, which is a heavy influence on his writing, and also the way that he sees the world, Between the World and Me. For those who may have not had a chance to read it, it's a book that is written in the form of a long letter to his son. James Baldwin had a similar sort of letter that he wrote to his nephew. And so Ta-Nehisi drew from that for inspiration. Of course, unfortunately, growing up in Baltimore is also known for violence, high crime, gun violence. And so Ta-Nehisi Coates, being born in late 1970s and coming up in the 80s, he experienced a lot of that violence. And so he said, "I could not retreat as did so many into the church and its mysteries. My parent rejected all dogmas. We spurned the holidays and marketed by people who wanted me to be white." And I thought this was an interesting quote, and it kind of speaks to his own sort of theology or lack thereof, because he is publicly known as an atheist. And so it's sort of curious to see how, growing up in the household that he grew up in, whether it be the environment that he grew up in, or the influence from his parents that sort of made him shy away from religion. He said, "We would not kneel before their God, and so I have no sense that any just God was on my side. The meek shall inherit the earth meant nothing to me. The meek were battered in West Baltimore, stumped out in Walbrook Junction, bashed up on Park Heights, and raped in the showers of the city jail. To be Black in the Baltimore of my youth was to be naked before the elements of the world, before all the guns, fists, knives, crack, rape, and disease. The nakedness is not an error nor pathology. The nakedness is the correct and intended result of policy, the predictable upshot of people forced for centuries to live under fear." Ta-Nehisi is kind of painted as this person that has like this pessimistic view of the world. And a lot of folks, particularly white liberals, are expecting him to sort of speak in an optimistic tone. But from his particular perspective, especially growing up in West Baltimore, there's not a lot of things to be optimistic about. So he kind of draws sort of this straight, sort of cutthroat picture that is direct, that is sort of, the truth. And it's interesting because, again, this book came out, I want to say, in about 2014. And so his son was still pretty young, I think 13 or 14. So this is a book, again, that he's sort of emoting and has the audience in mind, which is his son. Ta-Nehisi Coates is known to write specifically about policy, which goes pretty good with the book that we were assigned to read. The Case for Reparations is a great example of a piece that he wrote in the Atlantic that focused specifically on policy in Chicago. And so for this particular side, it's titled Community, Environment, and History. Coates grew up in West Baltimore, once home to Cab Calloway, Billie Holliday, and Freddie Gray. At the time of when I pulled this particular source, in 2019, looked at 50% unemployment, 30% poverty rate. And then just a quick historical lesson: in 1910, Baltimore's mayor signed into law the first residential segregation ordinance. And although Baltimore segregation ordinance of 1910 was not legally successful, it tilled the soil for new racist policies and practices to grow and flourish. I found this particularly interesting for me in particular because my grandmother purchased her home in 1970, her first home. Fair Housing Act was passed in 1968. I never had the chance to actually speak to her about her. She passed away a couple of years ago, but I'm pretty sure that it's no coincidence that that was the time period that she was actually able to successfully purchase her home. And so Ta-Nehisi sort of did this sociology of Chicago and Lange, focus on housing policy and effects that those policy practices and budgetary decisions has on the Black community, specifically in terms of building wealth. And so hyper-segregation meets hyper-policing. Baltimore City is, of course, one of the cities, not the only city, but one of the cities in America that's known to be hyper-segregated. And so hyper-segregation and hyper-policing, there is this correlation that exists. And so violence was an epidemic in Baltimore in the late 80s and early 90s, as it was in many other cities. There's crack intruded into the drug market, long dominated by heroin. In 1993, the city crossed the 350 homicide mark. Martin O'Malley, city councilman at the time, who was elected mayor on an anti-crime platform in 1999. He was elected governor in 2006. And during his tenure, at least at city council, arrests had jumped to 101,000 in 2005 from 81,000 in 1999. And this is also mentioned in Ta-Nehisi's book. His friend Prince Jones, who attended Howard University at the same time that he did. Prince Jones was kind of, if there is any such a thing, a perfect victim, if you will. He was slated to go to the Naval Academy, had everything going right for him, doing everything that he was supposed to do, and was still murdered by PG County police. I want to say, if I can recall the story correctly, the police officer followed him all the way from PG County to Fairfax County, outside of his jurisdiction, basically on, reasonable suspicion. Some Black folks some folks get reasonable doubt, and most Black folks get reasonable suspicion. So he followed Prince Jones, ended up murdering him. And I believe you can find and learn more about his story in public newspapers and online. And this is the last video and end of the presentation that I will end it on.
I wanted to respond to two things. I think this is really, really important. The first thing is, we all stand on the shoulders of our ancestors. And so I think it's really, really important for people to understand that the demand for reparations is actually as old as enslavement in this country. So it's actually as old as the country itself. In the case for reparations, I go through the history, of that. Immediately after enslavement, people were asking for reparations. And, one of, the answers that I record in that article was, well, we gave you Christian civilization. We brought you over here out of the barbarism of Africa. The question of, payback to the, formerly enslaved is settled. Our account is even. It's a favor to you that we actually enslaved you. So there's always a good reason not to do it, or what people will fashion as a good reason. And they did it at that time. The second thing is, I would say that people have this idea, and please don't take this the wrong way, but they have this notion that Black people went free in 1865 and then, everything was okay. In fact, what followed that was 100 years of, if not state sanctioned, the state certainly looking away, from a campaign of terrorism. So I am, for instance, myself, sitting here right now, only one generation removed from the generation of redlining. My mother grew up in segregated Baltimore. She lived in public housing. My grandmother had to get a contract loan. So the crime actually isn't as far away as we think. The third point I would make is we have to recognize that we've actually given reparations before. We gave reparations to interned Japanese Americans in this country. And listen, this is important. This is important because the internment of Japanese Americans is further away than the period of redlining. That happened in the 1940s. The period of redlining wasn't outlawed until the late 1960s. So the crime actually extends past that. So, you have living, victims, and you certainly have the descendants of those. So I actually think it's a little easier to figure out than maybe sometimes we have it in our head as.
Hi, YouTubers.
And pending any questions, that ends my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dante. I want to know if your classmates have any questions. And I will say that this book, I'm happy you selected Ta-Nehisi Coates, and I'm also happy you referenced Between This World and Me, where it could be added to the Sociology of Baltimore reading list for sure. You may, if you haven't read it, you can possibly make a request and put this on a wish list or something, and or just on your own purchase a copy or get a used copy, find it, and I think it should be on your permanent bookshelf. So I'm happy you were able to select it. Any questions for Dante? Any questions or comments? And just share with us, because the remainder persons in our class will be reaching out to some folks to invite them to our class. Can you share what happened in terms of you reaching out to Mr. Coates, who was very, very, very busy, I'm sure.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Trinity. And they can.
I was wondering, because you quoted him a few times in your presentation, and you also showed a video of his perspective and his thoughts about redlining and how reparations were given to Asian Americans while excluding African Americans. So I was wondering which part of his his life and his philosophy do you think you feel attached more than anything else? Because I know you went out search for him, but what aspect of him do you think you relate to the most? Is it his upbringing, or is it more how he conducts himself as a person nowadays?
That's a good question. I think so. When I first, discovered Ta-Nehisi for myself, I was somewhere in Juarez, Mexico, and I was sort of brand new introductory to my whole sort of political journey, if you will. And so the first piece that I latched onto was the case for reparations. not because it's any particular new argument, it's just framed in a new way. And I think that in particular sort of had me latch onto it. But I think I'm more aligned with his father's ideology than I am with Ta-Nehisi. His father's a Black nationalist, sort of Pan-Africanist, and I don't think Ta-Nehisi leans that far to that radical side. But I think there's a lot of things that I have respect for, just in terms of, like, I think he should have been a sociologist as well as a journalist, because the way that he investigates stuff and the way that he writes is just a certain level that I want to aspire to. So that's kind of what gravitated me towards it. But to answer Dr. Pratt Harris's initial question, so I reached out to a representative of his, but as she alluded to, he's super busy. And so I think he, of course, has that new position at Howard, but of course he has probably a trillion other things that he has going on at any given time. And so it was definitely a wish list, hoping that he would show up. So, because I actually went to go see him in Baltimore when he came out a few years ago. So it'd been nice to see him actually pop in and be a little bit more personable. So that's kind of what happened. Thanks for the question.
No problem.
So
Any additional questions? Yes, Devin has it. Go ahead, Devin.
really a question, it's more of a comment. But I actually read the book a few times, and I think you did great on the presentation. There's a lot of great information. I mean, it was probably so much information, we had a difficult time choosing what to discuss, but I definitely read the book a few times. It's actually, I have the audio book on my phone, and it actually inspired the book that I wrote, because I like the form of him writing a letter to his son. I think it was just a great job.
Thank you so much. And then you already shared your book in the chat. You can put it again, the link, so we can make certain if we missed it, we have that. Thank you so much. Any other questions? So one of the things I find fascinating about tonight is that thing that I call the Vine works. There's nothing that we do that we necessarily have all the control over or any control over. So it was so fascinating to me that Devin reached out to one of our special guests who hasn't quite joined us yet. And Dante shared some time ago when we read his book, his philosophy doesn't necessarily align with his own, but Ta-Nehisi Coates's does. So to have this guest come and join us tonight is just so divine as far as I'm concerned. So I want to thank Devin for inviting, I guess, one of the authors that we read this semester. And I'm going to give Devin the opportunity to, number one, introduce his guest based upon his presentation from the semester, but then also tell the class who will be joining us after Devin gives his presentation. And our guest is coming in eventually, the additional guest will be coming in shortly after. So Devin, thank you.
All right, thank you. So I actually invited two guests tonight. My first guest is here already. My first guest is a community advocate. He is an entrepreneur. He is the owner of a nonprofit organization that just uplifts and inspires. Initially, it was just the youth, but now is community as a whole. So my guest, Dawi Sewell, is the founder of the GROW program, and the GROW program stands for Getting Ready for Obstacles in the World. He does a program that I showed you guys on video of Cash App Classroom, which he teaches just financial literacy to the youth. But then he also is doing a program on Thursdays that teaches financial literacy to the community. And economics being one of the social institutions, I wanted to just invite Dawi in, but he's here now so he can just give a little background information about himself.
Yes, yeah. First off, thank you for having me. Definitely. I appreciate you as one of my brothers, man. I really do. Hopefully you guys can hear me well. I had to stop off at a Starbucks to jump on and participate. And this lighting, I don't know if I chose the best area. But yeah, so to tell you a little bit about the GROW program, like you said, GROW is an acronym for Getting Ready for Obstacles in the World. And that's what we do. Our nonprofit has been in the community, mentoring young people and helping them face the obstacles that they help them, hurdle the obstacles that they're facing in the world. Some of the things that we do is, like Devin talked about, is Cash App Classroom, which is an online virtual financial literacy course. And it's fun. You got to figure out how to tap in and how to get young people's interest, and what better way to get their interest in money. So they get a chance to come on their phones and look at my Instagram Live, and they learn financial literacy skills and budgeting, saving. As a matter of fact, fast forward really quickly, we did Cash App Classroom for well over a year. I want to fast forward and talk about the program we're currently doing, which is free financial literacy for the community. So at my office on Utah Street, I have experts from Rollins Financial Group helping people with their credit for free. So they're pulling people's credit, giving them the strategies to build their credit, and giving them information. A lot of people don't have it. So the reason I said I wanted to fast forward, because I wanted to give a quick example of how we get our young people ready for the obstacles in the world. Some of the brightest stars in the course we're doing at my office are the kids. Their knowledge of, you can ask them the names of the credit reporting agencies, they'll know it. A lot of the adults don't know it. You can ask them strategies to boost your credit score really far, really fast. They'll give you ratio rules, like only if you have a line of credit, only use 20% or 10% of that line of credit. Of course, the max is 30%. They'll know stuff like that. They can explain to you what an authorized user is and how that boosts your credit score. And the list goes on. And I found myself being really proud when I'm in a room and the kids are actually more knowledgeable than the adults, simply because they apply themselves. They get on Cash App Classroom. They're hungry to learn. Sure, they think they just getting on because they want some money. And sure, that's fine. But they actually retain this information because they become passionate and competitive about getting the information and getting the answers correct because they want some money. Yeah, so that's some of the stuff that we do. We do quite a few things, but I'll try to be as succinct as possible and just talk about Cash App Classroom and the current program that we have going on for the community. It's not just kids either. Like Devin said, we started out solely focusing on kids, and it's expanded to the community as a whole.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So I think what we are, again, these divine moments are still unraveling. So I want us to enjoy this moment, embrace this moment. So Mr. Walker is now going to share the second person that he invited to class this evening. And you wrapped up right in time with sharing detail about your work. Devin's going to introduce the next person, acknowledging that the class was responsible for reading his book. And then after our guest kind of shares with us, as we kind of give him some information about the Sociology of Baltimore, which I'll do that part. After that, Devin will then do his presentation. So this is working out wonderfully. So Devin, you have the mic. After you're done, I'll say a couple words and then our special guest will share. Yes.
Okay, so early in the semester, we read The Other Westmore. And there were so many things that were inspiring to all of us in the book. So I decided to reach out to see if we can have him come to class. And we have candidate Westmore joining us now.
Thank you so much for introducing our special guest. And I'm also acknowledging that because of that book, we have a student, Darius Spencer, who for his project this semester did The Other Darius Spencer. And just to give you some enlightening us about our class, this class is the Sociology of Baltimore. We're looking at all things Baltimore. We began the semester the first day when I was definitely cringing about COVID in classroom, right? We had steamed crabs outside, right? You guys remember that? We're doing all things Baltimore, acknowledging the urban center acknowledging the people of this city, acknowledging issues related to crime and poverty and justice, social justice, social institutions and how people are shaped within this city. So we talked about all these things, and the books that we selected helped us to better understand a lot of these things that we talked about in class. And then the students were responsible for identifying a family or individual from Baltimore that they can describe and highlight and share about, given our job, as it relates to the sociology of Baltimore. So with that being said, if Mr. Moore, candidate Moore, is available to talk, you have the floor. You can say whatever it is you'd like to say to this group. And we're going to just take a moment to quiet ourselves, come on camera, because we do that when we want to engage in this environment, and just listen in. Thank you, Ms. Williams. Also, thank you, Ms. Williams, for setting this up.
Yeah, no, of course. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Devin, for extending the invitation. Wes is not quite ready yet to log on. He's coming from another engagement, but he will be here by like 6:45. If you can circle back around to us.
That's fine. And then again, I just want to thank you for having him join us. And I'm going to share this with you. I said this in an email note briefly. The class knows this. The first book we read was Growing Up Barksdale. This is to enlighten our class. The very first book we read was Growing Up Barksdale. And one of the things I talked about as it relates to Growing Up Barksdale and reading The Other Westmore was that one of the last times I saw Dante Barksdale was after having been on Mr. Moore's talk show, November of 2019. And so again, I talk a lot about divine moments. So it's almost like a full circle moment as we get into the end of the semester. I'm saying hi to Mr. Moore, and then students actually read that book. So I just want to, thank you for having him join us this evening. Yes. What's about to happen is Devin's going to share his presentation, and then you guys will have the mic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So my presentation was more of a group conversation. I didn't create a second video, but I did have questions for the guests, and I don't know if the classmates have questions for the guests as well. But I did have a question for Dawi. I wanted to know, why he felt that it was his responsibility to teach these classes to the community and to the youth. What's driving him, what's motivating him, where does that passion come from?
So you said, why do I feel like it's my responsibility to teach the classes? And where does the drive or the passion come from?
Right.
The drive and the passion definitely comes from like my life and my personal experiences. And I made a post recently. I said that it's funny how our pain becomes our purpose. And what I was referring to is, my story, my life, how I came up in West Baltimore, my experiences, all the experiences, bad and good, that shaped who I am today. So I've been through a lot, and I'm here and I'm thriving. I'm not just here, I'm thriving. So I feel like it's important for me to work with people from the communities that I've been in. And, I was in the schools for a while. I had mentors in the schools, and I used to always tell, when I used to try to motivate some of the other staff, I said that, because sometimes they would ask why we would go the extra mile. Some of these kids to the staff seem pretty extreme. And I said, well, for me, they're not that extreme, not to me, based on my experiences and what I used to do at their age. But I was willing to go the extra mile because I wasn't gonna write them off. Because so I looked at myself at that age and what I was actually doing. And then I look at myself who I am today. people who haven't walked that walk, they can't see it. So they just see those kids who was involved in some, pretty, violent stuff, or in the streets, selling drugs or whatever they're doing. And society's quickly to write them off because they don't know what the end result looks like. So yeah, I'm a little more passionate and connected because it's my story. It's my story, and I'm the end result of that story. And I'm still writing the proverbial novel. I'm still writing the chapters. It's not over, but I really like where the story is now. So I feel connected. I feel obligated because of my life and how connected I am to the community.
So do you have any success stories that you can share from, I guess, the youth or adults that you teach? Yeah, I got quite a few success stories. I made a post, I think it was last week, and the video, there was a kid that was answering all the questions so again, I do the weekly free financial literacy course at my office, where there are financial professionals teaching people about credit, pulling people's credit, showing them how to heal their credit. And most of these adults can't tell you one credit reporting agency, let alone all 3 or 4. There's just so much they don't know. And a success story is Jaden, _Jaden on Instagram. The way he's in the video answering the question, man, essentially, I take so much pride, right? And I keep laughing, and I was in the video, I'm laughing and just saluting him, and I'm smiling, inside, and I'm smiling outwardly because that's the pride I have when these kids are still in high school, 14, 15 years old, and they have knowledge I didn't have until I was in my 30s, So that's a success story. I have other success stories. So I have another company. I have several companies. I have Grow Community Care, which is behavioral health, and we provide PRP services for the community. I also have Oval Cleaning, and I have about 10 staff that work for that company. And those guys are guys that I mentor, guys I took off the corners that was doing other stuff. My thought process is we can't tell people what not to do unless we are substituting that with better options, right? So it's one thing to tell a person they shouldn't be on the corner selling drugs and keeping a pistol in their waist or whatever they're doing. It's another thing to give them a better option, right? So Oval Cleaning, success story with that. Not only do I have like 10 guys working with me, and they work for multiple companies. Those same guys that work for the cleaning company work with me when I do the big events. I also have a staffing company. So like the restaurant locale on Redwood and Calvert Street, several of them work there as well. So they're making money multiple ways with me, right? And it looks a lot more fun. It looks a lot more glamorous than being on the streets fighting for your life, because they're able to be around celebrities or, whatever looks cool. So they buy into it. The success part of it, I would say that 3 of them have moved into the Central Point apartments. So my cleaning companies provide services for several clients, but this one I want to speak about right now is we provide services for luxury apartment complexes downtown, Central Point being one of them. And by working with these guys, I've helped them with their credit, helped them with budgeting and saving, and ultimately have increased their quality of living. So now they're living in the same place where I live, So that's a success story. And I'm still building with them. They'll be at the Thursday financial literacy course. So that's 2 success stories. Jaden from Cash App Classroom, he's only about 14 or 15 now, way more knowledgeable than the adults in the course. And Oval Cleaning, out of 10 of my guys that work for me, 3 of them have already moved into the Center Point, their first apartment, and their credit's in order or getting better. And I'm just teaching them about getting ready for obstacles in the world.
in real time.
Sounds great. I'm not sure if any of my classmates have any questions, but you're welcome to ask whatever questions you may have.
I have one question. Natalie has a question after me. It's a really quick question. Can you tell us just briefly tell us, Devin gave us a little bit of it. Tell us your Baltimore story in brief.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm from West Baltimore, and I was pretty heavy in the streets, and what that means is, I was getting a lot of money in the streets the wrong ways, selling drugs, running neighborhoods. And we was doing it at a really high level at a very young age. So yeah, that's what, that's that story. I don't know. So that's the gist of it.
Thank you for sharing that.
I like this part of it. I like this part of my life. I like this part of the story better.
So Devin had asked you about the success stories. My question would be about how do you handle, or have you had experience? I'm quite sure you have had experiences, but how have you handled speaking to people and they weren't ready yet, or they didn't receive your offers to help them to learn or things like that? How do you handle that, and how do you suggest people handle those type of things when you're trying to motivate people who you've been down the same path?
Oh yeah. Yes, it's great to talk about success stories, but I have to be realistic. And I tell people who want to be mentors that there's going to be a lot of people who, that not necessarily a success story, or they might try, you might try mentoring them and they're not very receptive. They fall off and they're just not ready to receive it. We have to be realistic and say that you might have more of those stories than the success stories, just to be honest. I've been doing this a very long time. So, you just try your best. You try to put them in position to win. Our mantra is...
2021.
Hello?
Continue.
Oh, continue, yeah. Yeah, our mantra is that a child doesn't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So we just pull up, man, pull up in the community, go to whatever they got going on and just show that we care, show interest, be a support system. And once they see, that you're a real one, they usually rock, even if they fall off, even if they continue to do what they're doing, the level of respect and the love. I still run into a lot of kids that fell off, and the way they greet me, because they know it was real, So I guess my advice is to be genuine. The way I build relationships is I'm transparent and I'm vulnerable. I have learned that kids are not always wrong and adults are not always right. Kids love to hear me be vulnerable and talk about my real life. They don't want me just keep talking down to them or talking at them. I talk to them about real stuff. I talk to them about successes, failures, relationship stuff. I'm just very transparent and real, and it resonates with them. So yeah, that's my advice. I would just say, be real, be open, be transparent. Don't talk at them, sit down with them, listen more than you talk. When there's a situation going on, first try to understand their perspective. And I think what I'm thinking about right now is even in a school setting, adults seem to always think that they're right and the child is always wrong. No, when I come into a setting, first thing I want to know is what's going on in your mind, what's going on, how do you see the situation? Build relationships that way. And if it doesn't work out, just know that you gave it your best, and you're probably going to run across them in 10 years. They're going to be 23, 24, and they're going to see you and just give you the biggest love. Trust me, I've been there. So yeah, that's what I would say. Just give it your best, be honest, be transparent. And if it doesn't work out, don't be daunted. Don't feel like you're failing. Just keep going.
Thank you. I have one more question. So since this is Sociology of Baltimore, what's your vision for Baltimore? What's your hope for Baltimore?
My hope for Baltimore. Oh, that's a good one. Thank you for asking that question. I love that question. What is my hope for Baltimore? Well, I would start with saying that I believe the problems that we face in Baltimore are very closely associated with economics. I believe that, so crime is synonymous with poverty, right? So when I hear people talk about their plans for Baltimore, if they think they're going to lock their way up out of this problem by just locking people up or tripling the police force, it's not going to happen. We've been doing this for a very long time. Crime is synonymous with poverty. So if you're talking about reducing crime, you should be attacking poverty, right? And some of the ways to do that is what I'm currently doing, I believe, is a small example of how we should be handling it from a larger perspective. I only have limited resources, but so I'm gonna tell a few stories and add some names of people that I know I have the right to add their names. Tonio was just at my brunch yesterday. Antonio, getting his last name, Peterman. He's now doing extremely well. He came to my brunch with his wife. She's an attorney. Tonio doing his thing. But when I first got back to Baltimore, he was still out there. And Tonio used to be into, some really violent stuff. He's a real street dude. And since I was moving a certain way, meaning I was starting businesses, he was willing to follow my lead this time following my lead in the right direction. And some of the opportunities I had, like he was one of my mentors in the school, didn't pay a whole lot of money, $15 an hour or whatever. He also drove transportation for me. That was like $17 an hour. So that was a little better. He also worked with me at PRP. So basically what I'm saying is it was 2 or 3 different ways he was making money with me. Then he started making money with me with the parties. So the reason he was willing to change his direction in this course is because of the economic opportunity. He got his apartment was actually in his name, and he had to put stuff in people's name because he running around getting money in the streets and shooting people. So he saw a silver lining, right? But it all started with economics, right? And even though I want to speak to this too, because somebody might say, oh, well, I've had meetings with the mayor's office in different places where they say, well, there's different jobs out there. There's $12 hour jobs, $15 hour jobs, and different jobs, and people not taking it. Let me also say this. Tonio took those opportunities because I presented those opportunities, right? So if a stranger who he didn't know or look up to or respect came with these opportunities, he'd be like, man, get the fuck out. You know what I mean? Like, who is you? You know what I mean? He would not have been receptive to it in no type of way. It wouldn't have happened. So we need the leaders from the community to come back and take up those roles as leaders. We need to give the opportunities and the resource to those leaders. Those leaders need to lead and pull people in based off of that grassroots respect level and all of that, and do exactly what I did, right? You pull them shooters up, you pull the dudes up on the corner, you can pull up whoever because your name is good and highly respected. And then you can disseminate the resources. And while you're doing that, you got your hands in their lives and you can guide them the right way. So exactly what I'm doing is a small example of what the larger solution looks like to me, right? So if we can duplicate that on a bigger scale, create these opportunities, get behind these businesses, fund these businesses, grow these businesses, give the leaders in the community opportunities to share the resources and opportunities with the people that respect them in their areas. Because far too often, the only economics in our neighborhoods was the drugs. The factories pulled out, all these different things pulled out a long time ago, right? So the only industries was the drugs. Now we need to tap in with some of these guys that's heavily respected in certain areas and get behind their businesses, grow their businesses. And then they can start snatching up some of the people who is viewed as, negatively in the community, and they are doing the wrong things. So that's my vision for Baltimore. Maybe we can have some leaders who understand this, and maybe we can start building it.
Thank you so much. So I think we're wrapping the questions for you. I want to say two things. Number one, as a reminder for the students in this class, we have 2 graduate students in the School of Journalism in this class. This is a sociology graduate class, often taken by sociology master's students. But we did have 2 journalism majors join us. And I will say that based upon my observation and my own experience, I am a degree journalist, and I actually worked as a journalist for a very short part of my career. I'm thankful for Devin and his interviewing skills. He's like a consummate interviewer. He's always documenting what's going on based upon his work in the class, and then obviously some things I learned later about some work he's done at the university. So thank you for that. Reminder, Devin, post the link or detail about your book in the chat for the class to see. Also, Mr. Sewell, if you can just say your name one more time and just say the title of your program. Also post the link if you have a website, post that into the chat. And our class is taking copious notes as always, because we reference all the material we've gathered from the Sociology of Baltimore class. And then with that being said, acknowledging that candidate Westmore has joined the class this evening. And we're thankful that he took some time out of his very busy schedule to join us. One of the things we mentioned early on is that this class had a required reading of the other Westmore. And if our classmate is here, I'm hoping he is front and center. I'm just seeing if he dropped off, if he's still here. He may be joining us. We had a student who, because of the nature of this class, students had to identify an individual or a family who's from Baltimore and or represents Baltimore, and do like a profile scenario. So when Mr. Spencer read the other Westmore, and we talked about it as a class, he did, well, the other Darius Spencer. And so I'm acknowledging that he did that. And then Mr. Sewell, your presentation reminded me, and I'm sure our class, about the book, The Other Westmore, because we're acknowledging that people will have a beginning and they have what we call the dash, which is what we do, while we're here and we're working through a purpose that's far bigger than anything we probably would have imagined when we began some of our journey. So that's, again, I keep talking about divine moments. I'm going to just put that out there. And just to personally thank Mr. Moore for something that may feel a little grim, but it's not that way. I see it as a deep and prophetic moment. The last time I saw Mr. Moore was November of 2019 in studio. And we were talking about violence in Baltimore on his radio show. And I was able to hug Dante Barksdale. And that was the last time I saw him. And so after I really paid attention to my reading list and the courses I was teaching, I mandated that his book, Growing Up Barksdale, was a part of this course's reading list. So our students have also read Growing Up Barksdale. And I'm just thanking you for, having us join you that day. But of course, we don't know what is going to kind of play itself out. So just thank you for that. So with that being said, you're here, your schedule is tight. We're thanking you for being here. If you'd like to talk about your book or anything related to Baltimore, growing up here, what your Baltimore story is, you have the mic. I'm passing the mic. Thank you.
Listen, bless you, Dr. Pryor Harrison, for real. And it is so good seeing you. And I was thinking about that actually, even preparation for tonight. That was the last time I saw Dante too. And it's one of these things when we're all together, you don't think about that often, that this could be the last time I'm gonna see somebody. And when you think about that, you think to yourself, what would you have said differently? Right? How would you hug them? How would you have hugged them differently? What were the last words you would have said to him? What would have been different about that conversation had we known at that moment that this is going to be the last time we're going to see him? Someone who meant so much to our community, someone who meant so much to our city. It's an honor to be with you. It's an honor to be with all your students. And And Brother Sewell, I mean, I gotta tell you, man, like you're a blessing, man. Like real talk, like I don't just appreciate everything that you were saying, because everything you're saying was not just important, but truly, I mean, it speaks to all of us. You know, this city is really important to me. Like I mean, I think about this place that is still my home. And I've had a chance to live all over the world. I had a chance to live overseas. I've had a chance to live on military bases. I've had a chance to live in South Africa. I've had a chance to live in New York. I've had a chance to live all over. This is home. It'll always be home. So much of who I am was influenced by Baltimore. So much of what I always will be is influenced by Baltimore. So much of what I hope to do with my life is influenced by Baltimore. I feel like this is a magical place that we call home. And I feel like one of the most beautiful things about Baltimore is this idea that Baltimore's story is still very much being written every single day. And I feel like, you know, there are now 600,000 people who have their hands on the pen. And so then the question is, what story are we going to write? I think about it in context of, you know, and I really do appreciate that y'all had a chance to take a look at the other Westmore. I actually had the joy of going to see Wes's mom this weekend. You know, and we can get into it during question and answer if y'all are interested as well. But you know, I'm still close to the family. I haven't seen Wes in over 2 years now because they've been locked down for over 2 years because of COVID. And so they've had no visitors at all. And so now I can talk to Wes on the phone. We can do a Skype occasionally. But also a lot of our communication is also as I get a chance to go see his family and go see his mom. But I think about the fact that, you know, this was a guy who I met now close to 20 years ago, you know, when he was first incarcerated. This is a guy who I first got a chance to meet, you know, and when I was still very much going through my own processes, when I was still trying to understand this basic reality where, again, it was my mom who told me about when she said, you know, I have to tell you something. She says, there are wanted posters in your neighborhood. And I was like, okay, I don't know why that justifies a phone call. And she was like, because they have your name on it. And that was the first time that I actually got this connection with Wes. And the more I learned about him, the more I learned about his story, the more I learned about this tragedy of what happened. The more I realized how much more we had in common than just our names. And that it wasn't just about, you know, us having the same name, that we were, you know, at that time, you know, living literally in the same area. We came up in similar circumstances, similar backgrounds, et cetera. And I knew there were questions I wanted to ask, and I knew Wes was the only one that could answer them. So one day I just decided to write him a note. And literally the first note, and by Wes and I laughed, the first note that I wrote him was like, hey, Wes, my name is Wes. Here's how I heard about you. And I really wasn't even sure if he would write back. And then a month later, I get a letter back from Jessup Correctional Institution from Westmore. And that one letter turned to dozens of letters. Those dozens of letters turned to dozens of visits. And I've now known Wes for close to 2 decades. And, you know, I think about it in context when people sometimes ask a question, it's like, so, you know, what made you write the book and what did you hope that people would get out of it? And what made me write the book, my honest and quick answer is Wes. Because I remember having an initial conversation with him. And the initial conversation that I had with Wes was I said, you know, it's crazy. Someone actually asked me about this idea of writing a book about our friendship and about our experiences. And immediately, without even any pause, Wes said to me, you should do it. And I thought about it, and I was like, why? And he said, he gave me 2 reasons. And he said, I've wasted every opportunity I've ever had in life. And he said, and if you can do something to help people understand the decisions that people are making, but also help people understand the neighborhoods in which the people are making these decisions in, then you should do it. And that really then became the fire and the focus behind this entire project. But then I thought about it in the second way, where it's like, when people say, well, what did you hope that people would get out of it? It was really very simple, where I said, I wanted people to understand how thin that line is between our life and someone else's life. I want people to understand that as a society, we are so quick to either congratulate or castigate. We are so quick to explain, well, to put some up on pedestals and some below graves without at all having any understanding of how either got there or context of any of this stuff. And it's one of the reasons why, again, I was so taken by, the conversation y'all were having earlier. It's why I've always been so taken by the work of, Dr. Pratt-Harris. It's context matters in all this. Neighborhoods matter. Backgrounds matter. And people can look at situations and somehow think that we all collectively as a society haven't played a part in creating that. That there's a measure of complicity that we all, if we're going to be honest, have got to own on this. Whether a person ends up in a good spot, whether a person ends up in a not so good spot, that we have a societal complicity as to how that happened, and a societal responsibility as to how we then address and talk about it. And it goes back to something that Brother Sewell was saying earlier, which I thought was so powerful, where it's like, when we're talking about Baltimore, like, this is a place I take personally. This is a city I take seriously. When I think about Baltimore, when I think about our children, when I think about our neighborhoods, when I think about our families, this is not just a passing thing for me. And at the same time, I also know that if we are not willing to actually go and truly understand and dissect and invest in ways in the neighborhoods and places that we have just chronically disinvested in a very intentional and a ridiculously inhumane way, then we're just going to simply be coming up to the same type of solutions, and then once again turning around and blaming a victim for their pain. And so this actually becomes a pretty unique space and moment where I feel like we can actually do that. And listen, it's not lost on me that the other Westmore now is 10 years old. I mean, the book is 10 years old. But if you read it right now, how many dynamics are that different? How much has changed? When you look at the realities of these two boys, how much of these things are actually fundamentally or functionally dismantled? When you think about the fact that that book was released on April 27th of 2010, right? What happened on April 27th of 2015? That was Freddie Gray's funeral, right? The same day that the city was placed under a state of emergency, literally 5 years to the day. This is the dynamic that I want us to be able to address these things with a core interest and a core understanding that at some point people should talk about this stuff like it's history. Because right now it's not. Right now it's still very much reality for people. These dynamics, these breaks, these differences, right? And that's what I hope for. That's what Wes hopes for. And I know, and actually, and I know I'll get a chance to talk to him and tell him about this experience as well. And I know he'll want me to tell you all hello. But I can't tell you enough how much it means to him and how much it means to me. The fact that that because of you and because of this work, and because of you, Dr. Pratt-Harris, his story still matters. And it's important that people understand that, and important that people understand his journey and his own humanity. in all this as well. So I'll pause there because I'd love to turn this more into a conversation and also answer any questions. But I just want to tell you from the bottom of my heart just how much I appreciate y'all having me here tonight and just for everything you're doing.
Thank you so much. And I know someone has a burning question. If you don't unmute yourself now, I'm going to go for it.
Yeah, I had a burning question. I just appreciate you coming on here to speak to us, and I apologize for the loud background. I'm by my job.
You good, man.
I just wanted to ask you, for the most part, for Wes Moore, do you feel as though his message and his story succeeds, or he would prefer, that to reach more than the finances or his freedom? Like, how you feel about that? To know that the storage. Yeah, let me clear it up. To basically just know that the message is forever going on, but he not free. So to ever experience or see these burning questions or these people that, because a person like me, I'm going through something similar. So it's big on me. This whole situation, just you talk and everything is big to me. So I kind of want to know what's his input to know this whole movement that's going on while he away. How do he feel about that? Or does it play a part negatively? Like, you want to be outside to feel it, different things. I just wanted to touch on that.
Yo, I love that question. Tell me your name. I can get your name. I'm sorry.
Darius Spencer.
Darius?
Yes.
Hey, Darius, I appreciate that question so much, man. And so first, just briefly, I'd say right now, he 100% wants to be free. 100%. I mean, like, listen, I mean, I don't even know if I can fully comprehend in my mind the emotions that would run through you. And I would ask for everybody here, think about the emotions that run through you when you hear someone say, you're in prison for the rest of your life, that you've just lost your freedom forever, right? I mean, think about that. Like, I feel like part of the human experience is this idea of you always have an ability to reshape your tomorrow, right? That's part of it's part of the thing we all thrive for. It's like, all right, if I can do this today, it means my tomorrow is different. Or if I can do this week, it means my next month could be different. If I can do this year, it means my next year could be different, right? But there's a level of hopefulness that sits with each and every one of us about how we have a chance to shape our destiny. That we own that, right? But imagine that feeling when you no longer are in control. You don't have a say. You've lost that. I think about that in context of Wes all the time. So I think there's no doubt, and now there's no doubt in my mind that if you ask Wes, yes, 100%, he'd want to be free, because the reality is Wes is sitting in prison right now for something that happened when he was in his early mid-20s. I mean, he's now in his 40s. He's coming close to 50. And he sat with that for his whole life.
That was.
Okay,
I don't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good.
Your statement as far as losing control is big. Like that whole perspective on understanding whether or not you strive every day to try to make tomorrow, or at least somebody in your presence, whether it's your child or your mom, you're trying to make somebody tomorrow better. And when you lose that control, it's big. See, right now I'm fighting my own case, and then I feel like I don't have no control over my situation, especially growing up. My mom had me when she was 15, and I always had control over, myself. I always was able to make the decisions for myself and for us. So now not having control over the situation, that kind of sums up my question is, does it even matter what's going on around you when you really don't have no control over your life anymore?
Yeah,
it discourages you.
It's very discouraging. But But I tell you what, though, one thing, and I know Wes would say that because he's actually said it to me before, is then it depends on how much power are you then giving to other people. And this is what I mean by that, is that Wes's freedom of movement is in many ways being controlled by somebody else. That's controlled by his sentence, right? He received life in sentence without parole. So therefore his freedom of movement, his freedom of, the ability to say tomorrow is like, hey, I want to go on a road trip, or tomorrow I want to do whatever. That freedom is now gone from Wes, right? Someone else controls that. Someone else owns that. But the power of your statement and the power of your question, it's actually saying, but how do we define freedom? Right? How do we define this idea of what it means to actually control who and what we are? And I think that if you talk to Wes, one of the beautiful things, and Wes is a brilliant dude. And I say this, and this is not some false humility thing. I think Wes is much more naturally gifted than I ever was. Which is also one of the really heartbreaking things about the whole thing, right? Is that he's so naturally talented. He's so naturally smart. He's so naturally gifted. And I think one of the things that Wes has also really helped to open up and help me to realize as well is how much of that freedom is actually owned by man versus how much of that freedom is owned by something else. And his ability to be able to be one and whole spiritually, his ability to be one and whole with the people in his orbit and in his ecosystem, the ability for him to be one and whole with his family, the ability for him to be one and whole within himself, that's not something that somebody can take away. That's not something that another man has control over. And I think that there's been, while I think for Wes, there has been this idea and this challenge of, yes, a sentence is confining my ability to move, right? This sentence is confining my ability. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier, was like, I can't even get my head wrapped around that. The idea of someone saying life in prison without parole or something like that, right? But I think one of the things I really have learned from Wes is that he just looks at freedom differently. And there's a different concept of freedom that he touches and he leans on that frankly I had not thought about in that way until I had a chance to grow with him in that way. And that's something that I think has been really, really important, really powerful. Now, the thing I would say about you, brother, and about the situation you find yourself in as well is, and I think, Wes would also echo this, is this ability to be able to know that, as what I like to say in the book, when second chances start becoming last chances, and thinking about, what is then given up. The ability to know that with every one of the decisions that we are making, that they will have real implications on people that we love. The ability to know that the things we do today will help determine our tomorrows. And the ability to walk with context. I actually think that's one of the most powerful gifts that I was given, and one of the most powerful, I think, gifts that frankly that Wes gave me, is I don't live a single day without a measure of gratefulness. Not one. Because I've seen what happens. I've seen how quickly all this stuff can get taken away. I've seen how quickly that freedom of movement happens. And so I think Wes in so many ways has changed my vision, mindset, and insight as to how I will try to approach every single day. And where there's a measure of thankfulness and there's a measure of aggression that I try to move in every single day now. And I think that, regardless of what your situation is, regardless of what that, where that lines, I would just hope and I would pray, and I know Wes would say the same, because he urges the same thing with me, all the time is just don't lose sight of that.
No, that's great advice, because that's what I had to learn over time of dealing with what I'm going through, is just, bringing a level of aggression, a level of anxiety to certain situations, and understanding, the decisions I make isn't just for me. Like, it's big, but this book, it give you a harsh reality of the situations that's at hand. If people understand what I mean, whether it's 10 years or 15 years or 5 years, I think with social media, we just get so displaced from where we at, and things just fly past our nose so quick that we don't really sit down and break down and analyze where we going at with things. So it gives people this false narrative that, they can do whatever, their decisions don't really affect nobody. But in actuality, I don't know. I'm just trying, like you said, bring that humility and that level of aggression and understanding to any situation every day I wake up. Because having your freedom took away, or even just justified, or put to a lens, put in a lens, is a sticky situation.
Yes.
So I just want to appreciate you for your time.
I appreciate you.
Spencer,
I appreciate you more than you know.
Mr. Moore, thank you. And this quick second, I want Mr. Spencer to tell you in a few words, how have you connected or engaged or acknowledged the other D'Arius Spencer?
Just to give them a quick breakdown, me in the book, understanding Westmore, and for my situation, I took the same exact route as you did in your book, and it was detrimental to me, really, just because knowing my situation was freaky. It was weird to me after doing my research that my close friend of mine, same name as me, and when we was introduced to the book, it was like, wow, how ironic. But then as I done more and more research, my friend, actually same name as me, was killed on my birthday. So it was like, I'm a person that always think like everything happens for a reason. Every message is put in your head for a reason. And we just dug in. The experience that Miss Pratt, Dr. Pratt, had helped us with and breaking down, I was late, and then she helped me bring my presentation to our class, and we got a great response. And I can commend you for doing what you did, because there's so many people with the same story, like just having so many people that's, whether it's your same exact first or last name, just having a person your age, your name, your birthday, killed or murdered or being tried for murder, or actually being tried yourself for murder or attempt murder. Is like, man, it opens your eyes, it helps you understand, and it gives you something to be able to bring back to your household. I got a nephew and I have a daughter. I always told my mom and my brothers and stuff, like, I don't want to have a son right now. I'm cool with having a daughter, because I want to present this type of information to my child. I want to present this type of information to my young Black boy to understand the severity of where we at in today. And it just helps you. And if I summed up our project, that's basically the same method that I took from D'Arius Spencer. Rest in peace. He was a good kid, though. I just appreciate everything that this class has done for us.
Thank you, D'Arius. I really appreciate that. And I know Mr. Sewell has had his hand raised for quite some time.
Oh yeah, I have to take myself off mute. Hopefully you guys can hear me. So yeah, I guess someone posed a great question to me. I'm sorry, I can't remember the queen's name. And she asked me about my vision for Baltimore. And I would like to pose that question to Mr. Westmore as well, and concentrate kind of like what I shared earlier. I was talking about our communities in particular. I know there's, when you say a vision for Baltimore, there's a lot of aspects of that. But obviously, I'm biased. I want to know about the forgotten parts of Baltimore, West Baltimore, East Baltimore, these inner city communities. When I spoke on it, I talked about the issues there. We talk about crime and we talk about hopelessness. And I believe that crime is synonymous with poverty. And far too many of our leaders have approached the matter by believing that we could lock our way up out of these situations and apply that type of pressure and things would change. That hasn't worked. I believe that if crime is synonymous with poverty, then we need to attack crime by attacking poverty. And my small example of me getting to it was creating engines, I call engines, which was essentially companies that can generate revenue and hire people and give them better options. So that's my vision for Baltimore. If we could take a model like that on a bigger scale with more resources, more opportunity, grow businesses, grow communities, give leaders in the community an opportunity to grow their businesses and have influence by sharing the resources with the people on the corners and in the neighborhoods that respect them and guide them in the right direction because they now have tapped into Baltimore's prosperity. So that's my vision. But Ms. Westmore, I'd like to know your vision for Baltimore and those forgotten communities.
I say ditto to your vision. No, listen, real talk, because and so so it's interesting. So until about 6 months ago or 8 months ago, I led one of the largest nonprofits in this country, one of the largest poverty fighting organizations in this country. And where just in my time as CEO, we have allocated over $660 million towards housing, transportation, food, education, criminal justice reform, early childhood, mental health, millions of dollars right here in Baltimore, $1 million in West Baltimore. Right. And I remember people would ask me, they're like, listen, so what do you have to invest in to be able to address poverty? Is it education? Is it transportation? Is it housing? Is it justice reform? What do you need to invest in? And I would literally look at them and I would say, yes. Yes, that's the answer. Because poverty doesn't show itself in one way. The thing about poverty doesn't pick and choose how it shows itself. It'll show itself in every single way in your life. Every way. From the air you are breathing, to the water you are drinking, to the schools you have to attend, to the transportation assets you have or don't have, to the way you're policed. Literally every single way it will show itself. And I'll tell people, it's like poverty is like water, right? When water floods in, water doesn't say, oh, I'm gonna go left today, right? Water goes everywhere where there's a hole. Everywhere where there's a crevice, water floods, all right? And what does water do? It leaves mold and decay and destruction everywhere it goes. So if you don't have barriers that keep water at bay, right? And so the way I look at it is that that's poverty. Poverty is water. It will flood and it will leave death, destruction, and decay everywhere it goes. Now, the thing that I love about the frame that you put out when you talk about what is my future for, what is my, what is my vision for Baltimore? And I know this is a institution of higher education, but yes, in transparency, I'm a candidate. I'm currently running for governor of Maryland, and I'm running for governor of Maryland on so much of the stuff that we're talking about here tonight. To be clear, right? And I'm running because, frankly, I have spent my entire adult life working on these issues. I spent my entire adult life working on these issues of fighting poverty. I spent my entire adult life trying to work on issues of exposing what's happening in so many of our communities so people can actually make change to them. I spent my entire adult life where I built a business here in Maryland that was helping first generation and first and family college students make it to and through college. All students who are the first in their family to go to college, knowing that 50% of students who start college every single year, who are the first in their family to start college, they won't complete their freshman year. And people sometimes think, well, it's just about the tuition. No, it's not. If you're not also addressing things like housing and transportation and food insecurity and childcare, you're going to completely miss the point, right? So I've spent my entire life working on these issues. And I've also come to a very clear understanding of this. And this goes back to the point you made. If we aren't fixing the systems that continue to allow people to fall between the cracks, then we are doing nothing but cleaning up the debris that comes from broken systems. Because these systems are broken. That's why they're allowing so many people to fall between the cracks, right? And so when I think about what I want to do, you're absolutely right. You know, I mean, and people say, well, what are the 3 things that you want to do, things you work on? I'm actually very clear, and I keep it very easy. It all starts with 1 letter: work, wages, and wealth. I want to create pathways for work, wages, and wealth for everybody, for every person. And again, I'm running for governor, every person in the state of Maryland. But since Baltimore is a part of the state of Maryland, and unfortunately, there's there's certain folks who seem to forget that Baltimore is a part of the state of Maryland. I want to create avenues for work, wages, and wealth for everybody. When we talk about work, I want to make sure that we actually, you know, to the beautiful point you made earlier, Ms. Sewell, right? It's like, how do we make sure that we're creating mechanisms where people are actually have the work capacities and are being trained for the jobs that are available now and the jobs that will be available tomorrow? Where right now we still have a system where we're creating people for jobs that are either no longer present, or the jobs that we have that are coming up online, we're not doing a good enough job of preparing our children and preparing our families and preparing our workers for those jobs that are coming up online. You know, by focusing, how do we focus on when we talk about wages, where, you know, how high a percentage of people do we have in the state of Maryland that lost their jobs due to COVID-19 who were living in poverty before COVID-19, i.e. the working poor, people who are working jobs, in some cases multiple jobs, and still living below the poverty line? How do you have people who are working and still living in poverty? And this goes back to the whole idea when I hear people say, like, well, people in poverty should just get a job. Well, many people in poverty have jobs. That's the problem, right? And so we need to make sure that people are getting paid a fair wage for the work that they're doing, that you're getting paid a fair wage for a fair day's work. And when we talk about wealth, that I'm talking about basics of economic security. And when I say wealth, I tell people, when I say wealth, I'm not talking fourth homes and yachts. I'm talking about, like, if your family member passes away, do you have enough money to bury them? Are you going to be in a situation where we had before COVID, 40% of people could not afford a $400 shot with cash? 40% of people in this country before COVID. I'm talking about the fact that if you lose your job, will you not become destitute within a matter of weeks? Will you have the opportunity to pass something off to your children besides debt, right? Work, wages, and wealth. And when you're looking at the dynamics of, you know, to your point about violence and crime and poverty and this and that, you know, one thing that you don't see is you don't see high crime rates in highly affluent areas, right? You don't see correlations like that. If you look at heat maps around the state of the areas that have the highest crime rates, the areas that have, you know, the highest rates of all these other challenges, what do you often see? If you take the heat map of poverty rates and you overlap them, they look exactly the same.
Absolutely.
So we have to be able to, I mean, so you listen, that's why I say your vision is my vision. If we can address that, if we can address economics, the economics of this all, because one thing I've always said, if we're not talking about economics, I don't know what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
It's economics. We've got to create economic opportunities for people. We've got to create sustainable economic mobility. We've got to create work and wages and wealth for all of our communities. We do that. It's amazing how those other issues figure themselves out.
Absolutely.
And if we don't, it's amazing how much those other issues will never figure themselves out. And you're not going to wrest your way out of it.
Absolutely.
Amen. You know, the criminologist here is echoing that sentiment. And I said the criminologist here is echoing that sentiment about not arresting our way out, but you can talk about that in depth. But I just wanted to share something with you. You talked about first gen. So our most recent chair of the sociology department at Morgan, she retired September of 2020. Is that right? Yeah, September 2020, Dr. Stella Hargett. In our department, we have the first gen project. So there's empirical work being done in our department regarding students who are first generation college students. And that's housed at Morgan State, and it began in 2019, and that was her baby. So we'll be sharing information with you all about first gens. That's a big deal to us. Natalie has her hand raised, and Natalie is in. Tell us where you're located and what time of day it is, Natalie.
I am currently in Accra, Ghana. This is my first time coming here, and it was a pleasure to be able to come and to take the leap for that exact reason, as a first generation in college, but also the first generation since slavery to ever touch foot on the continent. So I'm glad to be able to do that and be doing both of those tonight. But that brings me to my next question. I'm very passionate about the city that we come from Baltimore. And so my question would be, I know that a lot of times we talk economics, we talk all the different things, and a lot of the kids in our city, they hear the mayors and the governors talk about, $600 million. This is an amount that people have never heard of and never been seen. And when you hear that kind of money is coming into the city where you live, but you have no access, you don't see it, you still see generations with the same exact environment that you're struggling with. How do you approach that and make that relatable so they understand what you're talking about, from saying $600 million that they've never seen coming into their schools, coming into their houses in their neighborhoods? How do you make that relatable?
I'll let go. First of all, much respect for coming here from Ghana. Like, I am so impressed. That's so love. That is truly beautiful. That's really beautiful. And your question is such, I have to tell you, having conversations right now about things like the budgets for the state of Maryland or the budgets for the city of Baltimore, I just think to myself, I was like, yo, I remember where I'm like a decade or two removed from being that like little dude. It's like, if you would even talk about a number, I wouldn't even understand what you were talking about. Literally, like that number would make no sense to me. And I think that when I think about, again, if all goes well, and with y'all help, and when we all head to Annapolis in January 2023, we're gonna have a chance to be responsible for a budget of upwards of $58 billion. I mean, you think about what's come on board right now, just from ARPA, just from that 600, from the $670 million coming to the city of Baltimore. Do you know what's also coming in to the state of Maryland? $3.7 billion in discretionary capital. 3.7 billion. And people say, well, some of that goes towards education, potentially. But here's the thing to remember. There's an additional $1.7 billion coming in for education alone in the state of Maryland. And people say, well, what about infrastructure and transportation? Well, now, because of what we just seen from the infrastructure and transportation bills, we know that it'll probably be north of $4 to $5 billion coming in. And that is ridiculous when you think about the size and the enormity of that. But to your point, for the Natalie who came up in Baltimore, for the West who came up in Baltimore, what does that mean to me? How do I fully even begin to understand that? And I think that there's two things that we have to be able to do. One is we have to be able to make sure that the people who are in the community are actually part of this conversation. I used to have a sign that sat on my door when I was the CEO of one of the largest poverty fighting organizations in the country. And it said, the people who are closest to the challenge are the ones closest to the solutions. They're just hardly ever at the table. The people who are closest to the challenge are the ones closest to the solutions. They're just hardly ever at the table. If we are not centering our work with the community, if we don't believe in this idea of proximity and truly believe in it, not in some theoretical, but like, no, actually be unafraid of what you will hear from the people when the people are speaking to you. That's where the answers are, right? That's where the urgency is. It's not just for the people who have or can buy access, right? You have to be able to be with the people. to be able to understand where the solutions are actually going to lie. And so I think you have to be able to make your decisions. You have to be able to make your governing philosophy one of, you're coming from a place of experience and you're coming from a place of connection. Because if those two things aren't there, then frankly, you're going to keep coming up with the same wrong answers to the same common problems. All right. The second thing that I think becomes really important is we have to think about what are the investments that we are going to make that is going to be intentionally uprooting the things that are creating the problems in the first place. So for example, you cannot look at the challenges that are facing a place like Baltimore without also fully understanding that there are mechanisms that have created it and mechanisms that have compounded it, right? Let's just start with our transportation system. And people say, well, I don't understand what do you mean by transportation system? I mean the fact that you literally have transportation deserts within the city of Baltimore. What I mean is you have a person who's growing up on Landale or a person who's growing up on McCullough or a person growing up whatever. It's like, why should it take me an hour and a half to get to a job down at the Inner Harbor? Why should it take me so much to move to get to a place of opportunity, right? That's a transportation challenge, and one that was intentionally done to separate and one that was intentionally done to segregate. So the way you have to address it is you have to be able to create a transportation mapping system that actually addresses a history that has created these mechanisms of separation and segregation. When you look at housing, for example, like with last year, I was very proud to work with Senator Antonio Hayes, who's the senator for the 40th district here in Baltimore, on his groundbreaking bill that dealt with fair appraisal value. What fair appraisal value is how certain homes in red line neighborhoods automatically are receiving a lower appraisal value. Do you know what that does by definition? It by definition decreases the amount of wealth that person has. So when we look at the fact that we have an 8-to-1 racial wealth gap in the state of Maryland, that's not an accident. It's not because one group works 8 times harder. It's because of things like unfair appraisal values, which Senator Hayes's bill works to address. It's this type of thing that I think there needs to be an intentionality about it. And your question is brilliant, Natalie, because it goes back to how are we being intentional about who is part of the conversation and who's helping to make these policies and who's actually advising folks. And it's about using our policy and using this once in a generation opportunity. Like, let's be clear, $670 million is coming to the city of Baltimore, 3.7 billion is coming to the state of Maryland, 1.7 coming towards education, $5+ billion coming to transportation. That's not coming next year. This is a one-time shot. This is a generational opportunity. And frankly, that we got from Congress and we just gotten from the Biden-Harris administration, right? Where they're now passing this capital down to mayors and governors to be thoughtful about how can we use that capital to be able to create different pathways for families and individuals. And we are in a moment where we just can't miss our shot on this.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to try to wrap the questions right now. There are a couple of things I like to get on our end of conversation agenda. Number one, we're going to say thank you before you leave. Number two, we're going to take a picture using this apparatus where we're going to come on camera. And also, I want to acknowledge a couple of things. So Dr. Roden Trader is the immediate past chair of the criminal justice program at Coppin State University. And myself, we co-teach a class, Policing Inside Out. Natalie is one of the students in this class, fall semester, it's the 4th cohort. And one of the things you said speaks to what we have done. And Ms. Williams knows we've invited you to the closing ceremony for that class, and details are, I'm sure she'll share with you. But one of the things that we've done, there's a book that is going to be out spring 2022. It's Why the Police Should Be Trained by Black People. So when you talked about like the people on the ground or the people who are having the experience, having the solutions, that's what that book is about. The first chapter is Dr. Roden Trader, and Dr. Bahia Muhammad from Howard University, who are writing about Black criminology and how our voices in the discipline can help shape the needs of the people regarding policing in America, in major cities and beyond. And Dr. Muhammad, just some quick background, she actually designed that Policing Inside Out class, of which there's some information shared with you regarding that. The other piece I just wanted to offer is there's a chapter in the book that I co-wrote with a young man who's incarcerated, acknowledging the role that law enforcement play in the detention of Black people when the likelihood exists that the person is wrongfully convicted. So you talk about having a relationship with Wes. You know, me and his young brother met 6 years ago. The family, we were connected to the family. His mom was like my auntie. You know, I know with Darius, he's connected with that family. We're building relationships. That's what this whole thing is about. And lastly, I'd like to acknowledge our classmate Gavin, who's on the road, and he's going to make a connection with Mr. Sewell. He'll be following and connecting with Mr. Moore because he himself is starting a nonprofit, and his goal is to change the game in Baltimore regarding quite a few things. And he's using a lot of what he's doing as a master's student in sociology to get him to the next stage of bringing out his nonprofit. So just wanted to make sure we got that in. And at this moment, and then you can chime in after that, and I'm going to stop talking because I know you got to run eventually. I'm going to go ahead and do a screenshot. If you all can come on camera, and I mean, Williams come on camera, that's just fine. I'm going to do a screenshot using my Mac. Of course, I forget what you got to do. You got to do Shift, Command 3. That's it. I'm going to do it one more time. Okay. I'm going to do a screenshot. Put your smiling faces on. Miss Hatton, please come on camera. Miss Hatton is a singer. She is a product of Kenyatta Hardison. You may remember her. She is a coach in Baltimore. She's brought young people from Cardinal Street School to The View. So, okay, one more time. I'm going to smile. And I know where some of us are, so we're not on camera. Mr. Walker, where are you? Please come on camera. 5, 6, 7, 8. Thank you so much. Okay, Mr. Moore, you have the last word. Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it.
No, let me tell you, this is my joy, it's my pleasure, and I tell you, I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while, and I know why, right? Y'all are the ones doing the work. You know, you're the ones who are willing to fight for our children when there are people who think that sometimes we're not worth fighting for. And I just think that there's a real beauty in not just your passion, but there's a real beauty in your motivation behind this stuff. There is no doubt in my mind that we can do so much better for our kids. And y'all continue to give good examples of the things that we can and we should be doing in order to do that. And so I just, I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate you. How much I appreciate you, Dr. Harris, how much I appreciate just our ability to be able to build without limits and to be able to dream without boundaries in this. When people tell us, it's like, well, you know, you look at current situations and you say, well, it can't get better. It's like, says who? The challenges we've had have all been man-made. So I think that the way we can dismantle them should be man-made too. I want to make sure that we stay in touch as well. Just so y'all have it, you know, my email is easy. It's just wes@wesmore.com. Also, I think Kayla, who's a remarkable member of our team, I think she also put some information inside the chat as well. I would love to be able to find ways to work with you. I'd love to be able to find ways of getting you help and your support, because I'm telling you, kind of going back to your question, Natalie, and I can't wait for you to come back to the States, man. We got a lot of work to do together. But you know, when I think about it, it's like this is a once in a generation opportunity for us to get this right. And if we don't, then shame on us, man. We have a chance to on everything, just as Mrs. Sewell was saying, it's like on every facet, on the air that we are breathing, on the water that we are drinking. Why is it that in Baltimore City Public Schools right now, the kids cannot drink from water fountains? Right? It's 2021. And we have students who cannot drink from water fountains because of lead, because we've known that lead is a neurotoxin for a century. But for some reason, when it comes to our children, we have not figured that out. Why is that we're still dealing with access of, with a lack of transportation assets, right? Trying to move people basically from where they live to where they work, that there's no east-west side connection point in the city of Baltimore, in a city that's the largest city in the state of Maryland, and we have no real mass transit options. Why do we still have situations in housing that, again, we're talking about the amount of vacant homes that we have within the city of Baltimore, and no one seems to have a solution for this. Where we are dealing with the level of violence and trauma. In my home, I know y'all heard the story of what happened with Mother Player over in Southern Baptist Church over in East Baltimore. That's my church. That's my church. And we can't pretend like that is not having a significant impact on not just Mother Player and her, not just Mother Player's whole family, but our entire church community. So we have a unique opportunity to be better. We have a unique opportunity to invest correctly. We have a unique opportunity to be able to protect each other. We have a unique opportunity to be able to add a trauma-informed lens in everything that we do. We have a unique opportunity to get this right. And so I'm just incredibly grateful for all of you and your time tonight and for your leadership. And like I said, I really want to make sure we stay close. I really want to make sure we stay in touch. I really want to make sure we build together. And I really want to make sure that these things that we have to talk about right now, the same how I talked about how 5 years today, the Other Westmore came out was the day of Freddie Gray's funeral. Like, I'm so tired. Let's have it, and let's make a commitment so that in future generations, they can talk about stories like the ones we were talking about them, like their history.
Thank you so much.
Because that should be all of our goal.
Thank you so much. And one other thing I wanted to do before we leave, and we're going to all unmute ourselves and do a round of applause, just acknowledging that Takara is currently traveling, so she couldn't get on camera. A graduate student, Rosa, is getting a lesson in Baltimore like she never imagined. She comes to us from Buffalo, New York. And I want to thank you, Mr. Moore, and Dante Bryant for your service. He's a student of ours who has served, and he is about to earn his master's degree in sociology and go on to get his doctorate in the same discipline. So thank you both. Thank you, Mr. Moore, for joining us, and Kayla for calling and locking you in. And again, we'll be in touch about future endeavors. We so appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
God bless y'all. Thanks, y'all.
Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Peace, brother.
Yes. So class, I'm not leaving. We're still hanging out. We can have a debriefing. You were like, I'm out here. Natalie, what time of day is it, Natalie?
We're 5 hours. We're 5 hours ahead, so
I can't count. What is that? Oh, almost 1 o'clock.
Yes, yeah, yes.
Okay, it's party time. If you can hang.
Oh,
you can
I'm okay. I'm okay. I managed you, so you're fine.
I know Mr. Sewell had a question, but she told me he was going to leave. So my apologies for not getting your question in. Any comments or thoughts right now? I'm just going to acknowledge a couple of things. Number one, 2 weeks from tonight, we're having our final presentations. The remainder of our class will do their presentations. You've done your work to at least try to invite the special guests. We're not meeting next Monday, and let me tell you why. Because Monday, December the 6th, is my baby's birthday. I'm dedicating that entire day to her turning 9 years old. She's halfway to 18, so I'm going to be partying with her. I've already started because there was some snowflakes we saw today, so we're going to celebrate that. Mr. Sewell, if you want to pose your question, but again, class, thoughts, comments, and next steps for your presentations.
Oh yeah. So I was just speaking. I think I wanted to speak to. He made a point that resonated with me. Mr. Westmore made a point, and last time I was talking to him was at a different regard, and we had a great conversation about the people closest to the problems are closest to the solutions. And that is what I believe, the same thing. So I believe it's, along the lines of what I'm saying in terms of we need to get people that are closer to the problems to be the leaders to help lead the community up out of these situations. And far too often, the people that are closest to the problem who may have a great idea lack the resources to implement their ideas and their concepts. And then the other thing is, I like the 3 W's he gave, wealth, wages, and what's the other, one of the other W's? I can't think of it. So the way I see it is that again, economics is definitely the major challenge, and we just need to really support. We really need to support some of these grassroots organizations. I have a circle of brothers who have companies who are doing the same things that I'm doing. And if we grow some of these businesses, because there's big business happening in Baltimore. We look at Harbor East and we look at these other areas, millions and millions and millions of dollars is being made. And a lot of these guys who already have millions are being given millions. And if they include some of these people that are closest to the solutions or closer to the problems economically, then we can create some of these solutions. And one of my contracts was recently increased downtown because I'm doing business with a developer. And this is just a small example of when they allow us to tap in, then we can grow. When I started a cleaning company, I had like two employees. They allowed me to tap in. That increased 10 employees. 3 of them are now increased their quality of living. They not around their neighborhood where they had to carry guns just to go get on a bus. Because what's going on out there, these rival neighborhoods, everybody has to associate with, different groups, different gangs, or whatever the case may be. Now they living somewhere where they don't have to do that, But again, it's about economics. It's about all of this money happening in our city. They gotta let us tap in, or we don't see the people that have that after community neighborhood or after this neighborhood. It's because they not tapped in to the prosperity that's happening in their neighborhood. They know that's somebody else building. They know that's somebody else's block. They know somebody else getting the money, but we not getting it. So yeah, he just said of quite a few things that resonated with me. And actually, the last time we had a conversation, we definitely saw eye to eye. So this was a great opportunity to talk. And I thank you guys so much for having me on. And it's a great opportunity to hear the brother speak again. He's very inspiring. So
definitely, Devin, we giving you kudos, man. You just said, I'm gonna bring this dude in. So you did it.
Thank you both, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Devin.
Thank you so much. Anyone else have any other questions or comments? Again, 2 weeks from now will be the last time we will meet. You want to prepare to just have the opportunity to engage via these presentations. We're going to take more pictures, so get ready with your best self. Any other thoughts or comments? I think Natalie may be saying something.
I was just going to say congratulations to the seniors, just in case we don't see them before they graduate. So congratulations.
These students are earning their master's degree. Journalism, is it global journalism? That's the title of the degree, or is it journalism, Devin?
Journalism.
Okay, and Dante in sociology. So congratulations on taking care of business in that way. Saying you mastered it. That's quite a feat. Any other comments or questions from the room? Well, enjoy the next couple weeks.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Enjoy the next couple of weeks. Continue to be safe. There's something called Omicron going around. So continue to do the same thing you've been doing to keep yourself safe. And I will see you on the 13th. Good night.
Hello, I don't mean to cut you off before we log off. I was trying to speak to you.
Okay, that's fine. Let me turn this recording off.